Hells to the yes, my friends! This week's episode of Naruto Shippuden was an action fest not to be missed. You need to watch this week's episode as we got to see an incredible confrontation between Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju, and it did not disappoint. This was a great adaptation of the manga chapter, and what was also great about this week's episode is we also got to learn a little bit more about the mysterious death of Susanoo Uchiha. We also got to see how basically the Senju clan and the Uchiha clan finally squashed their shit and began the formation of the Konoha village. So, right out the bat, this week's episode's animation and artwork was on friggin' point. Everything looked nice. There were only a few scenes in the entire episode I felt were a little off-putting, but for the most part, when there was action going on, in particular when you had Hashirama's massive golem made out of wood fighting against Madara's giant perfect Susanoo, everything there looked awesome and very clean. This was definitely the best version of Madara's Susanoo that I think we've seen in the show. It just looked really awesome and very devastating. And after watching this week's episode, it's official. Kishimoto has some sort of like obsession with Kaiju, or giant monsters. We've seen that since the beginning of the show with frickin' the giant Gamabunta frog fighting against Shukaku. Now we got these massive Susanoos. We've had all of these giant monsters fighting each other. And after Naruto is completed, I only have to say this to you, Kishimoto. Make a Kaiju monster manga. It would kick ass. One of the important things to take away from this episode is you actually get to learn a little bit more about how Susanoo Uchiha was killed. Before, Madara just sort of mentioned that he died on the battlefield, and then he attained his eyes and got the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. And in this week's episode, you get to see that it was actually Tobirama who dealt the fatal blow to Izuna in a very action-packed and brutal action scene, and it just sort of showed how much hatred they had for each other. And I really liked how they showed how time went on, because the episode actually opened up when they were still kids, and there was a scene where they met at the stream and they were throwing each other rocks, which they were trying to let each other know that everything was going to be a trap. They should have called in Admiral Akbar. But that's when the father and the other son come in and they start to fight against each other, and there's this really great action scene where the fathers are trying to literally kill each other's sons, which is very disturbing, but both Madara and Hashirama are able to stop this by throwing the stones, and then that's when they finally realize they're both from the Uchiha and the Senju clans, and that's where this big war sort of starts between them, and as time goes on, they become the respective leader of their clans, and they continue to fight until they come to that big battle, which involves the giant golem, which has the big dragon wrapped around its neck, and the Susanoo, and after a lot of blows and literally like leaving massive craters in the earth, it's Madara who actually is defeated first. He's lying on his back. And this is probably one of the craziest scenes of the episode, and it really shows how strong Hashirama's resolve is, because at this point, Madara's done, he thinks he's going to be killed, but Hashirama lets him know he wants him to join with him so that they can form their village, the one that they wanted when they were kids. But Madara thinks it's too far and that drastic measures need to be taken, and he says the only way this is going to happen is that if you kill Tobirama, or if you kill yourself. And Hashirama's not going to kill his brother, and this is just to demonstrate the bond he has with his brother and to show how strong it is. So he decides that he's actually going to kill himself, but this is eventually stopped, and this is where we get to see that they form the Konoha village. At the very end of the episode, I get a lot of chills when they're standing on top of the mountain and they're looking over the forest, and it ends just right there. It fades to white, and it was really awesome. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Naruto Shippuden? As you guys know, I'm an action junkie, so I immediately loved this episode. It wasn't perfect, however. There were some moments where the animation and character artwork was a little spotty, but for the most part, this week's episode looked friggin' fantastic. Obviously, the big thing to take away from this episode is the battle between Hashirama and Madara. It was handled really well, it had some great music cues, and they did a great job of displaying how big their actual summons really were. The Susanoo, when it was slowly walking towards the massive golem, had a lot of weight behind it, and it really made it seem like it's a big, massive, destructive creature. And then finally, when you had the big golem come out, that looked really great, and I was really interested to see how they were going to handle that. But with the animation, the color, the music cues, and the voice acting, it really did justice to the manga chapter, and that's what I think I loved most about this week's episode. Getting to learn a little bit more about the death of Izuna and how Tobirama was responsible for it definitely gave a lot more weight to the confrontation that they had later in the episode, and that made it all the more tense, and that's just another reason to check out this episode. However, this is not the end of the story of Hashirama and Madara. There's a little bit more behind it, and I'm sure we're going to find out in next week's episode. But this week's episode right here was handled really well, and if you're a fan of the series, you must check this one out, as this is definitely one of the best episodes of the year so far. It definitely had some of the best action of the series I've seen, and it's really demonstrating why Hashirama was so freaking powerful. They've always mentioned that he was one of the most powerful ninja of all time, but I loved how that scene opened up where Madara was walking out to him, and he finally started to summon his Susanoo, and then Hashirama used his wood abilities to start tying it up, and he was immediately starting to be defeated by that. It just shows how capable he really is. And also, they just did a great job of montaging through the years and showing us their development. Otherwise, this was a kick-ass episode that had some great production value, and it was only spotty in a few parts, so I'm giving this week's episode a 9 out of 10. Check it out, Naruto fans. It was awesome. Thank you guys for watching my video today. Before you guys leave, please tell me your thoughts about this week's episode of Naruto Shippuden. How did you like the battle between Madara and Hashirama, and what do you want to see from the future of the series? Remember guys, before you leave, also hit that like button so you can help out our videos, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. You can also check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. I'll put links for those in the description box below. I'll see you next time, guys. Super Kami Guru 9000, out.